So I wanted to talk a little bit about Dangerous Pursuit 47. You might think that you can get 48, but take perfect lines, then that'll be 47. Actually more to it than that. There's some unintuitive time saves you need to do. So later on I'll go through the entire video and I'll talk about each one of these lines and what I'm thinking with each one. But what I'm going to go over first is some general tips. Something you can do to improve your driving. And the first thing, most importantly, when you're playing this level, one of the things that'll happen all the time is you'll spin out whenever you drive onto these curves. It doesn't happen every single time, but it happens often enough like that it causes you to lose speed and spin out. You lose control of the car. To prevent that, it's actually really easy if you just let go of the analog stick when you hit the curb, like right before you hit the curb. Let go for maybe half a second. That doesn't happen. See, it's pretty smooth. Here's another part where it can happen all the time. So if you're turning, you spin out, you know? But if you let go of the analog stick, I've kind of messed up a little bit there, but you get the idea. If you let go of the analog stick, smooth sailing. Every time you drive on one of those little curbs, you want to let go of the analog stick. It just increases your chances that the run will continue. Otherwise you might spin out. Now when you're going straight like this, it doesn't really matter as much. But anytime that you're driving onto one of the curbs, let go of the analog stick just for half a second before you hit that curb. It'll make your life a whole lot easier. So another thing I wanted to talk about is that sideswiping cars doesn't actually lose that much time. So if you're driving parallel to them and you just kind of graze the side of them like that, that loses barely anything. Here's another, I'll try to, like that. Basically nothing, so don't worry about that kind of stuff. When you're driving in the intro and you see sparks, that doesn't really lose that much time either. I mean, it does if you hit the wall, but if you're just on an absolutely perfect line and you just get sparks like that, doesn't really matter. You're not going to lose too much time. Not enough to make 47 impossible. Another thing, and this is really going to help too, if you start from the intro cutscene like this, you can just hold R and you'll drive forward. But if you restart and you're holding R, nothing happens. So that little bit of time where you have to press R there, you'll actually drive slightly faster. You'll accelerate a little bit sooner if you start from the intro cutscene while holding R. And it saves about 1/10 of a second. I mean, it's a pretty big deal in a driving mission. So always start from the intro cutscene while you're holding R. If you're playing on an emulator, you can use a save state and it'll work fine. If you're playing on console, you can still get 47 from restarting like this. You'll just lose a little bit of time. But if you're playing on console and you really want every frame possible, then you go to the menus like this. Start on operative. It's a little bit annoying, so if you're playing on real hardware, I honestly wouldn't recommend it. Let's go over the video, and I'll talk a little bit about thought process with this. Let's just watch the run. This beginning part I think it's pretty self-explanatory. You don't have to take absolutely perfect lines to get 47. So that's why I would say another general tip would be don't reset too often in the beginning. Like, you shouldn't be resetting before this point. If any resets that are happening way back here, it's just wasted time. There's no randomness, there's no luck. So don't try to be too aggressive and cut these corners so perfectly or whatever. You don't have to. But don't worry about it. The first major time save is going to be right here. These two barriers. Whenever you run into them, you're going to lose a little bit of speed. It's about 1/10 of a second. But You can save that time if you run over the right side of this rightmost barrier. And I think also the left side of this left barrier, but a little bit faster to do this one. Now in the video, I kind of swipe the car and you can see that I kind of get on an imperfect line here. But when you hit the right side of this barrier, you get what's called a phantom hit. So the barrier kind of flies toward the camera and the camera actually moves. That's how you know you got it. The phantom hit is just, if you hit props at a certain angle, you just go through them pretty much. They'll still react, the props will still move around, but it doesn't slow the car down at all. Do that. You could also shoot these barrels over here and blow up the cars, and the barriers might get knocked out of the way, but the phantom hit is much easier. Another general tip I'll give is that don't spend too much time trying to correct your lines. Now here I do get, a little bit of a correction here. So I'm heading this way, but I want to head this way. So I do a little bit of a correction. But, if you overcorrect and then, you turn to the right and then you're like, oh, I'm going too far. So you turn back to the left and you keep correcting like that. Every time you turn, that's just going to lose a little bit of speed. So if you're on not a perfect line, but it's not like the worst thing in the world, just keep going straight. Don't worry about it. Just, if you're a little bit too far to the left here, it just means that you just start turning right a little bit earlier to compensate for that. You're not going to lose like 1/10 of a second from having a slightly imperfect line. So don't worry about it. Another thing I wanted to mention, another general tip, is that when the tires screech like this and they leave the tire marks, that loses a little bit of speed. So you want to turn gently whenever you can. At the very intro here, the very beginning, right here, I turn very gently, and I think there are little tire marks, like you can kind of see them right there, but nothing sharp. Right here, I think there's always going to be a little bit of smoke on the tires just when you push the analog stick, but there are no tire marks, so you don't lose any speed when you do that. Or if you do, it's not very much. So like I said, don't be too aggressive with these lines. You can see I'm still really far away from this. I'm still really far away from this when I'm turning. You don't need perfect lines for a 47. Just don't lose speed. Right. Sometimes this guy with a rocket can shoot you and knock you off course. I feel like it actually makes you go faster if it hits you in the right way though, so it kind of hit me in the back. I feel like it pushed me forward a little bit. Maybe it helps, I don't know. But the first hard part of the level is right here. This turn, I think, I'm going to go back to the gameplay here. You might think that you want to kind of go wide here so that you can get a better line going onto this straightaway. So what I used to do looked kind of like this, like that. Go a little bit wide, and ignoring the drifting there, you get the idea. But that's actually not what you want to do. You want to go as straight as possible through this. Didn't turn enough, but you kind of go as straight as possible through there. It's very slightly different. And then when you get to the corner here, let's go back to the video. See what I mean? I can kind of go frame by frame here. When you get to this corner, then you start turning left. Don't hit this sign. So you'll end up going towards this spot, like toward the sidewalk where this corner meets the road. Right about there, just like that. But you want to go straight through this Q pulse. If you touch the Q pulse, you are going too far to the right. If you get close to it, you're going too far to the right. So you just go straight. Ideally, you want to go parallel to this wall. Give yourself a little bit of room so that way you can start turning left. You don't want to be right up against the wall. But if I play the video back, you'll see, go straight. No fancy turns, not trying to give yourself room to get a better line at the end. Just go straight. That's how you maintain all your speed. This is kind of the same way, this turn. This is one of the hardest turns in the level, in my opinion. So we go up here. What I used to do was I would try to turn like really aggressively, so that way I would have a better line going onto the straightaway. If I do it right, I would do something like that. The problem with this is that when you're turning very aggressively, your tires screech and you lose a lot of speed. It's not obvious, but you lose a lot of speed. Another thing is you don't want to run into those props like I just mentioned. So you can't drive through those, you'll lose too much speed. So I would do something like that. But it turns out that's actually not the best. While it is better than some of the 47s that are out there, the best thing to do is when you're going onto this straightaway right here, you want to aim toward this window. You want to aim for that window. Yeah, I'm actually going a little bit too far to the left in this save state I have. See? You want to be going like this, toward this window. Then just turn whenever you can, turn to the right. And then get on this next line here. The line that I'm talking about is you want to aim for the corner of where the sidewalk meets the road, where the crosswalk is. You want to aim right here. So I'm going to go toward this window and I'm going to aim right there. That's the line you want to get on. Just like that. Now I'm not doing it perfectly here, but get the idea. That's what you want to aim for. Turning a little bit too early. I'm a little bit rusty. Just like that. So now that you're going in this line in this direction, you just turn left as soon as you can and you make a wide turn. The reason you want to make a wide turn is because that's how you maintain all your speed. I didn't lose any speed on that turn. Well, I guess you always lose a little bit of speed when you're turning. But that's how you maintain all your speed. And that's how you get 47s. So let's go back to the video and you'll see how I do it in this. Another tip, whenever you're going onto this straightaway right here before the booster, you want to get on a line that allows you to grab the booster with the left side of the car. You can see I'm driving toward the window just like I mentioned, but I'm a little bit too far to the right, so I had to slightly turn left to get to the booster. I'm not going perfectly here. I'm a little bit too far to the left, but that's okay. I turn toward the street corner, then I turn left, just past these phone booths. And if you do it right, you'll end up in the right lane here. I guess it's their left lane, but whatever. You'll end up in this right lane going towards like this pillar and the corner of this building. That's how you maintain all your speed. You don't lose, like I said, you lose a little bit of speed when you're turning, but this is how you maintain as much of it as you can have. And that's the difference between 47 and 48. This turn right here, doing this perfectly will save you several tenths of a second. I cannot stress it enough. This turn is so important. The rest of these are pretty self-explanatory, except this one. This one, it's not so intuitive, but you don't want to hit the curbs. Even though I said earlier that, you can hit these curbs if you're not holding the analog stick, then not bad. But it's not as good as driving on flat ground. So it's actually better, counterintuitively, it is better to turn, stay on flat ground, than it is to try to cut this corner, hit the curb. We'll lose a little bit of speed. But even though you lose a tiny bit of speed for turning, it's better to stay on flat ground, avoid these two curbs and the car that's trying to get you. You will maintain as much speed as possible through there. Then you want to get on this line, right between, pause the video, right between this pole and the corner of the building. Now the cars here are going to be random. Cars, you just have to deal with random traffic in this level. And I got pretty bad traffic at the very end here. Not bad enough for me to reset the run, but not ideal. The ideal traffic would be, well, no traffic, and that can happen on this road. Sometimes there's no traffic. Ideally, you want to end up in the middle of the road. Middle dotted line right here. But there was a car right here, this yellow car. So I had to be a little bit more to the left than I would have liked. But once you get past all the traffic, another thing is sometimes you can end up with cars in the left lane. And if that happens, you have to be a little bit farther to the right than you'd want to be. You want to be in the middle of the road. If there's a car in the left lane, go to the right of it. Never ever go to the left of a car that's in the left lane. If you end up in this median, the middle part of the road here, you are way too far to the left and you'll probably not get 47. You want to use the booster as soon as you hit this curb, like as soon as the front tire hits the curb. And you want to be turning while you get there. So the visual cue that I used, and honestly it's not that great, I recommend coming up with your own visual cue, was like I would start turning right when this street light meets the corner of the building. I actually did it a little bit early here. I was worried about this car getting in my way, but I'm not good at reacting to visual cues like that, I guess. So I turned a little bit early, and that actually wasn't early enough. I had to worry about this car, so I want to get as close to these street signs as possible. Boost when you hit the curb. And my line here was not perfect, but I made up for it. There's, if it's not perfect, you can take a risk and drive between this sign and this street light. Hit the curb, so you lose a little bit of speed, but it's worth it. The easier thing to do, and you can still do this for 47, most of the 47 runs do this, you can just go to the right of the sidewalk. And because you're on flat ground and all that, you don't hit the curb. It actually doesn't lose that much time. It's barely any, don't worry about it. The cue pulse is the hard part. The cue pulse, you have to do this absolutely perfectly if you want 47. You have to time the cue pulse right so that you hit the van when it's at the maximum radius. So the cue pulse kind of radiates out. You want it to hit the van right at the end of it. Ideally, I've said the word ideally a lot, but because in the ideal run, you'd get like a 47.7, maybe 47.6. You would hit this at the very end. You can actually hit it later than I did here. So if we go frame by frame, there's the van. Now it's pulsed, so the cue pulse is still out. So I could have activated the cue pulse 1, 2, 3, this still counts, and maybe 4, like, a tenth of a second earlier at least. And that would have been the difference between here. The cue pulse is a little bit farther outwards on this last frame. You can see the difference there. Now I know the car is in a slightly different place, but it does radiate outwards constantly. So my point is that you don't want to hit the van when you're right here, because you can see how much farther the cue pulse reaches, and that's going to save you, at least a couple tenths. So you want to activate it right about, it looks like I activate it right about here, middle of the road, before you, right in between this turn and this turn. The timing is, I think it's a little bit easier than it looks. I think you just get a feel of it. So we'll look at this ending part one more time, and then we'll watch the whole run. I know, I guess there was no sound, so you can quit out during the menus. It's a little bit risky, I guess. Most people don't go for it. Now you'll notice mission duration 48. This happens because the in-game timer on the pause screen is not the same as the one that's on the results screen. So right here, the mission is over. As soon as you cue pulse the van, mission complete. That's when the time ends. But the pause menu still counts all this. So that's why it says 48. And actually, even when you pause on the frame that you hit the van, if you pause right here, it'll say 48. Or I guess if your 47 is low enough, it would say 47. But as far as I'm aware, nobody has ever paused during this and has seen 47. So that's how tight 47 is. So you just pause and quit the mission during this cutscene and it still counts. It's kind of a risk. I have paused, and if you pause on the first frame, then you quit out, it doesn't count. You have to do it on the second frame. Don't make the same mistake I've made. I would say just wait a little bit. You can watch the cutscene if you want, or you can just pause, sometime during the cutscene. So anyway, let's watch the whole run. And you'll actually see that my lines here at the beginning are not perfect. Like I said, you don't want to reset too many times in the beginning. You want to only reset for traffic. Traffic is going to be what kills 95% of your attempts. So any attempts that get killed before that, it's a waste of your time. So here's the first hard part, where you have to go as straight as possible here. That's not intuitive, at least not to me. Grab the Q booster with the left side of the car. Maintain as much of your speed on that turn as you possibly can, the little S bend there. Stay on the ground. Let go of the analog stick when you hit the curbs. This one is a really bad one for spinning out. This van, or the turn when you're trying to get to the van right here, this curb, because you want to turn to avoid, you don't want to hit the wall or anything. So you want to be turning while you're hitting the curb because you don't want to be flying toward this building. There's a really, I don't know how to say it exactly, but you want to let go of the analog stick at just the right time so you don't spin out. That's what I'm trying to say. That's one of the reasons that I actually boost after I hit the curb, or boost right when you hit the curb. If you boost too early, then you'll actually hit the curb and you'll spin out, just because you're going too fast. So that's one other little tip I can give you. You practice all of these things. You can actually time your runs using real time as well. You do that. So we'll go to the first frame of this. Now I'm using virtual dub to time this, but you can use live split or whatever, frame counter you want to use. Thing that's going to let you time it somewhat precisely. It doesn't have to be that precise. But if I time this, it says 47.750 at the very bottom. It's just cut off on the screen. I apologize about that. But if you are in the ballpark for 47, like if you're getting 48s and you're not sure if you can get 47, you should be able to get like 48.1, 48.2 at most. If you're able to get a 48.2 and you're using these strategies, I'd say keep going for 47, because you will eventually get a run where just everything goes right. But if you're timing your run from, when you first gain control until you Q pulse the van and it's like 48.8 or 48.7, there's something that you're doing wrong. I would suggest reaching out to the people on the Agent Under Fire speedrunning Discord and ask about that, or maybe post a comment on somebody's 47 run and ask them to watch your run and see what you're doing wrong. Odds are there's going to be one thing that you'll be able to improve that'll give you a couple of extra tenths of a second. That's what happened to me. I found out that I was doing this turn wrong and I was doing this turn wrong, and that costed me like half a second just by itself. So if you can just improve some very simple things in your 48 runs, then you could potentially get 47. So hopefully this helps. I'd like to see more people attempt this level. I think it's really fun. So if you have any questions about it, just let me know and I'll do my best to help you. Thanks.